Let me start with something that surprised me more than the phone itself. It wasn't the camera hardware, it wasn't the design, it was the comments. Phones don't usually spark real conversation anymore. Most launches come and go, and the reactions are predictable. Yeah, and people argue about specs, prices, or brand loyalty, and then everyone moves on. But after the Xiaomi 17 Ultra video went live, the comments felt different. People weren't just reacting to what the phone is, they were talking about what it would mean to own one. One person mentioned this would be a massive step up from their Redmi Note 10S. Another asked specifically about the anti-reflective coating, not in a technical way, but in a would this actually help me day to day kind of way. And then mixed in with all that were comments about pronunciation. How do you even say Xiaomi? That might sound small, but it actually says a lot. Xiaomi is still a brand that people feel slightly outside of. Even tech-savvy viewers aren't always sure how to pronounce it correctly. Some say Xiaomi, some say Xiaomi, some say Xiaomi. And honestly, most people just avoid saying it out loud altogether. Officially, it's closer to Xiaomi. But what matters more is why this keeps coming up. It's a reminder that Xiaomi still feels different, not mainstream in the way Apple or Samsung are, not fully normalized, especially in Western markets, and that actually plays directly into what the 17 Ultra is. This phone doesn't try to smooth out that difference, it leans into it. From the moment you see it, the message is clear. This isn't a subtle device. The camera module dominates the back of the phone. It's big, visually heavy, and unapologetic. Xiaomi didn't try to balance it or disguise it. They made a choice and committed to it. This is a camera-first phone. Everything else follows. That decision alone explains why reactions are so polarized. Some people see it and immediately think it's too much. Others see it and finally feel like a phone is doing something interesting again. And here's the key point. Both reactions make sense, because the Xiaomi 17 Ultra isn't trying to win over everyone scrolling past it. It's aimed at people who care about how images are captured, not just how sharp they look on a spec sheet. The 1-inch main sensor is the obvious headline, but not because of megapixels. The real difference is how it handles light. Shadows don't feel aggressively lifted, highlights don't blow out as easily, depth feels more natural, not simulated. It's the kind of difference you don't notice in a comparison chart, but you feel it when you start framing shots. Then there's the telephoto system. Instead of jumping between awkward zoom steps, the transition feels continuous and controlled. Zooming doesn't feel like switching cameras, it feels like adjusting a lens. That matters more than people realize, because it changes behavior. You're more likely to explore a scene instead of snapping one quick shot and moving on, and that idea of slowing down shows up again with the physical control ring. This is the part that separates the Xiaomi 17 Ultra from phones that claim to be camera focused. A mechanical ring isn't just a novelty, it changes how you interact with the device. Like, you're not tapping sliders or breaking composition, you're adjusting by feel. It's subtle, but it's powerful. And yes, this is where some people start saying the phone feels commercial or over-designed. But here's the thing. Marketing tries to appeal to everyone. This phone doesn't. It makes trade-offs very intentionally. It sacrifices subtlety, it sacrifices slimness, it sacrifices being forgettable, and that's why it's creating conversation instead of indifference. Outside the camera, the phone doesn't suddenly collapse into compromises. The display is exactly what you'd expect from a modern flagship. It's smooth, bright, and responsive without trying to reinvent anything. Battery life is solid enough that you stop thinking about it halfway through the day, which honestly is the best compliment a battery can get. Software stays out of the way, performance feels effortless, nothing screams for attention. Which brings us back to the core question people are actually asking in the comments. Not, is this the best phone? But, is this my phone? And that's where the Xiaomi 17 Ultra becomes interesting, because the answer depends entirely on who you are and where you're coming from. So who this phone actually makes sense for, and just as importantly, who it doesn't, because this is where a lot of confusion creeps in. If you're coming from a mid-range Xiaomi, something like a Redmi Note series or an older Mi model, The 17 Ultra, isn't just an upgrade. It's a shift in how you use your phone. The camera experience alone feels completely different. You're not just documenting moments anymore. You're slowing down, framing, adjusting, and thinking. For those users, this phone feels exciting. It feels like growth. But if you're coming from a recent flagship, especially something already strong in photography, it's odd that the decision isn't as obvious. This isn't a phone that wins by checking more boxes, it wins by changing how you interact with the camera. And that's not something everyone wants. Some people want a phone that disappears into the background, something thin, light, and neutral. The Xiaomi 17 Ultra doesn't disappear. You feel it in your pocket, you see it on the table, you're aware of it when you use it. That's not a flaw, but it is a choice. Another thing worth addressing directly is trust. A few comments mentioned that the phone felt commercial or questioned whether the Leica branding was more marketing than substance. That's fair skepticism. We've seen partnerships before that didn't really change much beyond the logo. But here's the difference. The Leica influence here shows up not just in color profiles, but in behavior. Contrast is handled differently. Black and white modes feel intentional instead of flat. Highlights roll off in a way that feels closer to how light behaves in reality, not how software tries to optimize it. Is it perfect? No. This phone won't suddenly make every photo cinematic. It won't replace a dedicated camera, and it won't magically turn casual shooters into professionals. What it does do is remove friction for people who already care about photography, and that's the line. If you rarely adjust settings, never zoom beyond 2 or 3 times, and mostly shoot quick snaps for social media, you might never fully use what this phone offers. In that case, the size, weight, and cost may feel unnecessary. But if you're the kind of person who notices light direction, who zooms deliberately, instead of pinching randomly, who cares about texture and depth, this phone starts to make sense very quickly. There's also the question of ecosystem comfort. Xiaomi still isn't Apple, it still isn't Samsung. Some people will always feel hesitant about software updates, long-term support, or resale value. Those concerns aren't imaginary, and pretending otherwise doesn't help anyone. But what's interesting is how many comments didn't focus on those worries at all. Instead, people talked about experience, about stepping up, about curiosity, about finally being interested in a phone again. And that's not something specs create. That comes from design decisions that take risks. The pronunciation jokes, the curiosity, the skepticism, they all come from the same place. Xiaomi still feels like a brand you discover rather than default to, and the 17 Ultra doesn't try to change that. It leans into being a choice. So here's the simplest way to think about it. If you want the safest option, this probably isn't it. If you want the thinnest phone, it isn't it. If you want the most neutral design, it definitely isn't it. But if you want a phone that feels like it was built around a clear idea and executed without apology, the Xiaomi 17 Ultra stands out in a sea of sameness. It's not perfect. It's not for everyone, but it's honest. And in a market where most phones try very hard not to offend, that honesty is refreshing. Before I wrap this up, I want to ask you something, and I genuinely want to hear your answer. Where are you coming from? Are you upgrading from a mid-range phone and looking for something that feels like a real leap forward? Or are you already on a flagship and wondering whether this is different enough to matter? And one more thing, how do you pronounce Xiaomi? Drop your thoughts in the comments. That conversation alone tells me more about where this brand is heading than any spec sheet ever could. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.